it's not about how close we can get to the line, it's how quickly we run far away from the line. Hi guys, welcome back
to our channel. Hi, nice to see you.
Oh goodness, we just wanted to welcome you guys because I feel like after our Let's Talk About Sex series, there's a lot of new people here, and so we just want to first and foremost welcome you to the fam. We're happy that you're here, and we want to thank you for all of the love that we can share so openly about such a personal topic and be met with so much grace.
Yeah.
And it's just been really cool to see God kind of moving through that series and your stories. And so thank you guys for also being open with us and super encouraging. It's what motivates us to continue talking about things like we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Like boundaries.
Yeah.
And we just want to preface with the fact that we are not the authority on this topic. Jesus, scripture, the Bible, that is your authority, but we're just going to be sharing from our experience, what we learned during dating, because this first part is boundaries in dating. And so we're going to be sharing what kind of boundaries we had, what boundaries we wish we had, where
what
we
worked.
fell short, what worked, what didn't work, all the things.
Yeah. And so just make sure you're subscribed, because this is going to likely be a 4-part series. So what to look forward to is, part 2 will be on boundaries in singleness. Part 3 is boundaries in marriage, and part 4 is boundaries in families and friends.
Yeah.
But this could end up being a lot more.
Yeah.
Who knows? But
it depends on what you guys want.
Yeah, it depends on what you want. So make sure, if you haven't already, like the video and comment below. This is what really helps us. If you comment, things that maybe you want us to expound on something, or maybe you're like, oh wait, I didn't really understand that, or you want to know more. Those things help us figure out what video we're going to do next. And this is probably the most highly requested video that we've had.
Yes.
Seriously.
Since our love story series, I feel like this is something that you guys have been wanting.
Yeah.
So.
And we've taken a long time because we wanted to make sure that we're answering from an equipped heart, rather than just like, oh, we want to get views, so let's just do that. And so it's taken us a long time, and almost 2 years of marriage, to get to a place where we feel like, okay, we've had some decent conversations, especially while dating, about what works and what doesn't work. And so, just as a heads up, we're answering these questions and we're speaking from like a Christian perspective. So just know that, but also we think that this can work with anybody's personal beliefs and relationships. And so if you're a non-believer, totally cool, you're welcome. We think that this will leave you encouraged and empowered to have like some healthy boundaries.
Healthy boundaries, and start some healthy conversations.
Yeah. A way to kind of know boundaries is, has anyone ever tried to maybe force you to feel, say, or think, or do something that you don't feel comfortable with, and you start to feel this anxiousness or protest? That's because someone's getting inside of your boundary. And so it's really important to know what your boundaries are and protect them, and because you have to know what it is you're protecting, which is what's on the inside of a boundary. And the easy answer for that is it's your soul. And so a lot of the reason why we want to do this series is because we're really big on soul protection and soul healing and so many things like that. Because it's so vulnerable, it's so sweet, but it's also something that you need to protect. And so for us, we really just want to make sure that you're ready to receive some of this information in terms of what is a boundary and why is it good for me to protect my soul with boundaries.
Yeah. And how to set them too, because I feel like so often we expect people to respect our boundaries, but if they're not communicated, you can't hold someone to that standard. And so we're also going to be talking about when to put certain boundaries in place and how to kind of go about having that conversation too.
Yeah. There's emotional types of boundaries, there's spiritual types of boundaries, and of course there's physical ones.
Yeah.
How far to a line do you go before you feel like you're crossing a line? And those are some really valuable things, and we want you to just not focus so much on the physical boundaries. And actually, let me just rewind. We don't want you just to focus on any one of those three types of boundaries specifically. What we really want you to focus on is the heart of it.
100%.
And so, for example, another car analogy, I'm so sorry, but if you're only told that, hey, when you're driving a car, keep it between this white line and this yellow line and you'll be good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll take that into consideration. Yeah. Okay, that's great. But if someone expressed to you and said, hey, when you're driving, make sure you stay between this white line and this yellow line, or else you could run off and hit a tree. Oh, you may accidentally hit a bicycle, or you may hit a family, a family driving the opposite direction. You start to see, oh wow, like it would be good for me to protect other people at the same time I'm protecting myself. And it becomes a hard decision because something so often that Christians want, or even people want, is a rule. Mm-hmm. And it's like
black and white.
Yeah, we're not going to give you a bunch of rules. We'll give you some tips and tricks. Absolutely. We're here for that. But what we don't want you to hear from us is this is as close as you can get to the line as long as you don't cross it. Because what we want you to feel is that heart conviction to where you don't even want to get close to the line. You're not okay doing this, So as we share some of those things, we're going to share some reasoning behind it as well.
Yeah.
For example, why we didn't live together before marriage. I'm not a big believer in living together before marriage. And Tori always has this great quote that comes off a little hard, but I love it. Why should Heather live together with her boyfriend before she's married?
So what I would always tell my friends who were kind of considering moving in with their boyfriend was, once you're there, you're going to feel like you're on an audition to be his wife, because he's getting all the benefits of you acting like his wife with a door cracked and he can leave, because there's not the commitment of marriage. And so I just always felt like my girlfriends who were living with their boyfriends were on an audition. And it's actually really crazy, the statistics behind living together before marriage and how much more frequently that actually ends in divorce. And so statistics aside, that was what I used to say, was I feel like you're on an audition.
To piggyback off of Tori and what she's saying in terms of like living together before marriage, I would get that question so often. I think I've mentioned it before, but one of the main reasons why people would ask me why we don't live together before marriage is because of money. They're like, oh, it's so much cheaper just to live together. Why don't you just move in together? You always want to be together anyways. And my whole thing is that whenever I looked at like our relationship, there's always like, I say there's three of us, okay? Stick with me. She's not pregnant. There's Tori, and then there's me, and then there's our relationship. Just a quick example is Tori could be okay being away from me for a couple weeks, a month, whatever. I could be okay being away from her for a couple weeks, a month, whatever. But our relationship couldn't handle that because it was so new and it needed to be protected. In the same way that, imagine that, this is a weird example. Imagine you have a baby. The baby's a month old, and at 2 a.m. it's screaming. What are you going to do? You're going to go take care of it because it can't take care of itself. And so Tori and I were really protective over our relationship, especially in its infancy, to make sure that it grew at a healthy pace. And so for me, I would respond to people whenever they would ask me why we don't live together before we're married. I'm like, listen, we're at this part in our relationship. If I can't sacrifice some money to make sure that my wife and I, or my future wife and I, are growing at a healthy pace and not putting us in situations that we don't want to be in for some money, then what is our relationship worth?
Yeah.
And we really had to embrace those types of things to make sure that our relationship grew at a very healthy pace. And that included how much we let our friends and family involved. That included like learning from some of our past.
So first, I kind of just want to share a little bit of experience from Chad and I. If you did watch our love story series, then you know that we dated long distance for a huge majority of our dating relationship. And it definitely made things really hard because to see each other, we were taking trips. And that kind of brings up a whole nother issue of like, okay, are we staying the night together? Do we have accountability? Do we have a curfew? Like, how does that work? And I know a lot of you out there are in long distance relationships as well, because I've seen your stories in my DMs. And so I did want to kind of address things that we put into place that we felt like were beneficial, and then things that would have been more beneficial. And I feel like, okay, first and foremost, I'll talk about the ones we had when we were long distance. And one of those things was that we were not going to talk about work after a certain period of time, which is more of like an emotional boundary. And then Two, in a spiritual boundary, we weren't going to pray together as like a unit while dating because I didn't believe that Chad was my leader spiritually. Now that we're married, it's very different, and I do trust him to lead me in a spiritual capacity, but I also have a very independent relationship with God as well, and God is still leading me. And so I wanted to make sure while we were dating, I was still relying on God to lead me in that area. And that was something that I was kind of like confused by with Chad at first, because I feel like when you're a Christian and you're like in this Christian relationship, you just expect that you're going to have like, oh, we're going to have all these like intimate prayer nights and we're going to do Bible studies together and all of these things.
Not this body.
And it's just not a good idea to bind yourself spiritually with someone that you're not actually bound spiritually to with the blessing of God. And I don't know if you want to talk kind of more in depth about that.
I don't want to get too deep with it, but I'll just say this. It's not that we wouldn't pray together. It was that we didn't pray as one together.
Yeah.
We could pray in agreement. I know it's getting kind of semantics, but it was just the one thing that I'm not leading her in prayer as a spiritual leader, because I'm not that, and because soul ties can come from that.
Totally.
And emotional dependency can come from that. And so I thought it was really beneficial for us to have a really strong personal relationship with the Lord in prayer outside of each other, versus just kind of depending on this relationship to kind of be the centerfold for how we pray, because we weren't even married. And so I didn't want to interrupt that relationship with God so much so that now she's depending on me for prayer, or what if God doesn't answer that? What does that mean about how he feels about us? You know, there's even emotional boundaries that I think was the next thing we wanted to touch on in terms of like an example. I was reading this book on boundaries and dating, and you know, obviously everyone's interested in the physical boundaries, but there's some other ones that are really important to learn how to talk about. And an example I read in the book is that there was this girl who grew up in an abusive household. And, you know, she's out of the household, but she's dating this guy, and he was a kind of a dominating guy, and it scared her. And so what would have really benefited her to say is like, hey, I grew up in an abusive household, and whenever you raise your voice, it really scares me, and it makes me shut away, and it makes me want to leave. And so we need to work on you not doing that, or else I can't be in this relationship. And that's like an emotional boundary. And I think we fail to see the need to have some of those in there.
Well, and I feel like just talking, like you mentioned protection a second ago, and I feel like all of these boundaries that we're going to talk about, emotional, spiritual, and physical, the heart of them is protection. And I think a lot of times we think of boundaries as things we can't do, and like we're bound to these boundaries. And the heart of these boundaries is to protect you emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And I think so often, like, we just get it twisted, and that's how the enemy gets a foothold in your relationship, because I always say he operates in that 1%. Like, he'll say things that sound true, and 99% of it can actually be true. But that 1% that's off is where he gets that foothold. And that's what we want to like protect you from, because we've fallen victim to the lies of the enemy and, you know, fallen short. And so anyways, back to kind of those boundaries and what we kind of put in place when we were dating long distance. Kind of like we said, like we wouldn't talk about work. And then in terms of like visiting each other, what we should have done was have more accountability, because we definitely were like, okay, the person can sleep on the couch or sleep at family's house or friend's house or whatever. And that was not always the case. And we definitely fell short in that. And I feel like anytime you're like in bed with your significant other, but you're not married, is probably just like not a good idea. Like the whole like Netflix and chill, watch in bed kind of culture we live in is not protecting you, because it's just like you're laying in bed with temptation at that point, because you're not like,
you're opening yourself up to potentially doing something you don't feel comfortable with. And so for us, it was just really important to, and this is unfortunate that we had to learn this way, but because we did cross lines in different areas like that, we started backing way the heck up. Even to the point where Tori, and Tori was super okay, just like hardcore making out. And for me, I couldn't do that because of some boundaries that she had expressed to me. and I received them. I'm like, wow, that's actually great. I hear you. And that made me get to a place where like, okay, I hear you. And I just want you to know that I can't even make out with you anymore because, and it's not to be mean, it's that I get going. And for me, it's just easier if we just don't.
It's a trigger.
Yeah, it was a trigger for me to take things a lot further. Yeah. And so that was something I had to do. But I mean, so were you even nervous to tell me about your boundaries?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I get this question from you guys a lot. Like, when is it appropriate to bring up the boundaries conversation? Mm-hmm. And I think something that did help, I will say, with Chad and I is we were friends for so long before that when we actually started dating, like, we had years of friendship under our belt. And
not always by my choice, by the way.
Yeah, well, but we did. And so those conversations, like, were brought up so early in our relationship. And I think we almost already, like, knew each other's hearts and, like, where we stood on that before we even were boyfriend and girlfriend. But if you're out there and you're walking straight into a relationship with someone that, you know, you just met and, like, it was romantic from the start, I genuinely feel like the earlier the better. And it's truly going to make the guy respect you more to know that you have those boundaries. Because you can't really expect someone to respect your boundary if it's not communicated first. And I think that it's, you know, a lot harder when you get in the heat of a moment to, like, be like, oh, by the way.
Hey, put your pants back on.
But seriously, so I feel like communication is such a important thing that you really need to have with that person, and being able to trust them, you know, with your heart and being vulnerable in that, to be like, hey, if we cross that, it's actually going to really, like, hurt me. And if they care about you, they don't want to hurt you. Yeah. They don't want to, like, you know, I remember when I first moved out to California, you know, we had been used to dating across the country, and then this first month, you know, we're dating in the same city, and we crossed a line that I didn't want to cross, and I felt such conviction and genuinely, like, wrote something super dramatic. Like, I remember the moment on the plane, like, I was crying on a plane. Like, it was conviction because it led to behavioral change. And so it was a good thing, right? It's good when God disciplines us. It's for our protection. And I remember having to have a conversation with him about being like, hey, my spirit, like, my soul, because we crossed that, like, I am feeling something I don't want to feel. And then we were like, okay, as a couple, because we love each other, we respect each other, and we're for each other, we're going to have to back up a lot to not put ourselves in a situation that's going to be tempting. Because there is that verse, do not think more highly of yourself than you ought, you know? Because a lot of us think that we can just lay in bed with our significant other and watch a movie and that nothing's going to happen. And, like, let's just be real. It's a lot harder than you think. Yeah. Because especially if you're like me, I'm a physical, like, very affectionate person. And so that's, like, how I want to show him I love him, you know? And that was really hard for me when we were dating to be like, oh, I'm going to have to learn a different love language because I can't be doing that.
Yeah. I really, there's so much I want to touch on what Tori just said. I just want to encourage you real quick that dating should not be used to cure your aloneness. If you're feeling alone, there are so many different things you can do to help you not feel alone. Dating is not a place to fill your aloneness with, because that becomes very dangerous, because basically you're saying that I feel empty, I'm going to fill it with this person who I'm romantically pursuing. And then what happens if there's so many things that are maybe not good about this person? You're a lot more willing to put up with those things that you wouldn't maybe put up with in a simple friendship, because they're filling multiple holes in your heart. Yeah. And so I just want you to feel encouraged that, you know, friends are for that. God is for that. Your spouse is not meant to help with your aloneness. I want you to feel encouraged and not to feel bad about you feeling like desiring a relationship if you're not in one. But it can make you make some wrong decisions. It can make you stay in a relationship that you probably wouldn't want to be in. It can make you stay in a relationship where someone can be really controlling or manipulative, or be with someone who's maybe not compatible with you. It can do so many different things because you're just trying to fill a greater need. And to to kind of go back to what Tori was sharing originally about being friends, I really want to keep hitting on that stigma that being friends first is bad. It's not bad. It's a good thing.
It's a great thing.
Because ultimately, if you're married, Lord willing, for 60, 70, 80 years, friendship is what you fall back on.
100%.
Not everyone, I don't want to say that, but so many of us are so interested in just being romantically interested in this person, but beauty is fleeting and charm is deceitful, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised, and looks will fade. They absolutely will fade. I'm not saying don't be attracted to your significant other, but I'm saying is if that's all you're searching for, that could be really dangerous, because if the person you're interested in doesn't have friendship qualities, what are you going to do the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, because that's what you always come back to, is being friends. So in other videos, I think in the singleness series, Tori mentioned a lot of non-negotiables. I laugh if it's over here. That's why I always say, like, click over here. So I was reading this book, and the book was talking about how the author is a clinical therapist, and he gives a lot of like marriage counseling. And he asked this huge audience, he's like, okay, what is it that you're interested in a potential significant other? What is it you're looking for? And some of the answers were, I want someone who loves God's word. I want someone who has great ambition. I want someone who's fun, someone who's attractive, someone who's smart, witty, athletic. By the way, all great things. I want all those things too. And hopefully she does. Like, those are good things. But he went on to share that as he was helping people in their marriage counseling, not one person, not one couple, I mean, was considering divorce because their spouse was unathletic or not witty enough or not funny enough or not attractive enough. The things that they were saying that were grounds for them to want to break up or they're experiencing deep problems were things like, he doesn't listen to me. She's so controlling. He is incredibly critical of me. I feel like I'm not doing anything right. She's very irresponsible with her spending. I just can't connect with him emotionally. And so I really want to encourage you that I think it's great to have a list of things that you're interested in, but those can become a mirage for the deeper character things that we should seek to be with somebody. And so I would just encourage you to not get so overly infatuated with somebody and who you think they are, and really give a good hard look into who they are. And the last thing I want to say off of what you're saying, I'm so sorry, is to make sure you feel comfortable sharing your heart and expressing your boundaries. Because I've seen a bunch of people message me that was just like, well, I've already been doing this for so long with my boyfriend or with my girlfriend. Like, what if they're not okay if I want to stop or whatever? And for us, it's just like, well, this is a great opportunity to see what they think about you. And if they don't want to honor your decision or your wishes or your fears or your emotions,
red flag. Maybe they're not there for you. Maybe they're there for only what you offer them, and they're there for selfish reasons.
And that can be a big red flag. So sorry I just talked for so long, but you're on a roll, and I was taking little mental notes.
No, baby, it was good. Something I was thinking about when he was just talking.
Are we gonna keep doing that?
Something I was thinking about is just peace over passion, because I remember when Chad and I were dating, he had said, and I like got upset with him. So upset. Because I was like, wait, are you not passionate about me?
I told her, I said that she's like, how do you feel about me? You know?
That's not what no, something you just like brought it up.
And I was just like, I feel so peaceful with you. And of course, what she wanted was, I'm just so, I want you.
That's not it.
Kind of.
We were driving in California, we were dating, it was like this whole romantic day, and he was like, I just feel like when people, ask me, like, I just feel like our relationship isn't like driven by passion, it's driven by peace. And now I look back and I'm like, wow, how amazing. But when we were dating, all I heard was, you're not passionate about me.
That was a conversation that went on for months, by the way. If you're a guy watching this,
don't say that.
Don't say that. Even though it's true. And like she gets what I'm saying.
But no, it's amazing. And now I'm like, oh no, that's you need to be driven by peace. Anyways, I thought about that when you were talking, just how when you're at peace with that person and it's not these like crazy highs and crazy lows, you're not worried about bringing up conversations that might be difficult, because you're at peace with that person and your relationship is marked by peace. And so I feel like if it's marked by passion, that means you're having these extreme highs and extreme lows, and no wonder you're kind of scared to bring up certain things because you don't want to go to an extreme low, or if you fear a breakup. I feel like with Chad and I never like feared things. Like it was definitely more like, oh, we're gonna talk about this, it could be uncomfortable, but like I'm not worried.
That was probably our greatest asset, was how over communicative we were. It's a big word for me, y'all. But we really did pride ourselves in being over communicative. We communicated a lot, all right? And I mean that. It's because Tori and I did slip up in some ways. But because of her ability to express that to me and my ability to express it to her, it just helped so much because, you know, ultimately, over such a long marriage, we're going to have to communicate about some awkward and hard topics. And I think sometimes it can be nerve-wracking for like when you should bring up things like weird things like finances or what type of, or how many children do you want? Or, you know, so what do you want our generosity to be like? Do you believe in giving to charities or not? Or, you know, there's a lot of different types of questions that people ask and conversations you can have while you're dating. Yeah. But people don't know really when to ask that. And so one quick thing I would want to say about that is that when you ask it is just as important as how you ask it, because it's always going to be a little awkward when you start prying around in some kind of deeply personal things. Yeah. Like, for example, are you in debt? Yeah. You know, are you dating someone who's in debt? Like, are they not good with their money? Or different things like that. It can be extremely personal, but we do feel like there's ways that you can have a very healthy, slightly awkward conversation about those topics, especially like, hey, how do you feel about waiting till marriage?
Should be early,
yeah. And so that's why we want to encourage you to have those conversations early. Yeah. But we also want to encourage you to have them in a way that's edifying to that other person, never accusatory, never defensive about your own things, but just a healthy conversation, and be okay with some awkward silence. You don't just got to like throw it in their face right away, but we do think that because of the stuff that Tori and I have talked about and the conversations that we've had and the stuff we've been through, we feel so much closer now. Another thing that I want to encourage you in terms of boundaries is that some healthy viewing of your spouse can be really good, and it doesn't always need to your spouse. Sorry, your significant other. Some healthy like reality checks and viewing of them can really humble you in a good way or a not so good way, because the person will really tell you who they are by how they treat you. Yeah. And you have to be willing to see that. And sometimes the best way to see that is through your community. And that's why we really encourage you to hang out with your significant other in community, with friends, with your parents, with mentors, whatever.
Like the whole thing about Love is Blind is so real, you know, like it's like you have blinders and you only see like these amazing qualities in this person. And I cannot tell you how many times my friends have been dating people and I am like, oh, you blind, aren't you? You know, like you're not seeing any of those flags that are just like waving around all over the place.
You have two babies.
I know.
I'll hear about that one later.
No, we both have 100%. And so I think that's why we are trying to kind of encourage you, because we don't want you to have to go through the same like heartbreaks and things that we've had to go through to kind of get to this, you know, point. And so back to like actual practical boundaries that I think we wish we would have had in dating was, I really wish we would have had a curfew, because I feel like that's just something that like my mom would always say, like nothing good ever happens after midnight, you know, and having a curfew, really trying not to go on like extravagant trips with your significant other unless it's like with family or you're like with a big group of people, like it's not that intimate. You're not like creating these like super intimate memories with someone who's not your spouse, because it really does like taint a town, you know, and you don't want that walking into marriage. And then two, like physically, I really, you know, this is something we talk about all the time. It's not as much about like what you do and don't do physically. It's so much more about your heart posture behind everything. Like kind of how Chad was saying, it's like it's not about how close we can get to the line. It's how quickly we run far away from the line. And I was looking at the lake earlier today, and I was just thinking about, like, if there was a huge alligator, Allie's not that big, okay? Allie is the alligator that lives in our little pond. But if there was a massive alligator and there was a sign that said, if you see the alligator, run, right? You're not going to be like, oh, actually, I'm going to go poke it with a stick, you know, and just see how close to the alligator I can get and it not, like, attack me. You know, that's the same way God looks at, like, okay, when I'm giving you this boundary of, like, sex is a protected and amazing gift, he's not saying that to, like, take something away from you. He's saying it's an amazing gift inside of marriage. And when it's happening outside of marriage, it's actually really dangerous for your soul. And he's like, flee from the sin. Flee from the appearance of sin. Like, run away. Don't dance on the line. Like, run from it. And I was really wanting to share.
So while she's looking for that, I'll share this. I really want you to feel encouraged to know that delayed gratification is a good thing. And I feel like this younger generation that we see something, we want it right away. We want it now. And I want you to know that a healthy discipline in your life can be really, really good for you. Speaking on what Tori's just saying about waiting until marriage to have sex. For example, with us two, I love that we waited. And a quick example is that we waited for so long until marriage that my wife knows that I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to hold off. And so if I'm ever gone for work, or if I'm ever in a situation that could be tempting, she's not going to have fears about me, because I wasn't just sleeping with her. So she knows I have good boundaries put up in my own life.
Yeah, self-control
To protect our marriage. And so, you know, there is a lot of messages that you can be sending your significant other in dating that will set you up for marriage. It'll really set you up. And delayed gratification is not a bad thing. It teaches you to say no to yourself, which, you know, deny yourself and pick up your cross daily. Ever read that?
So the verse I wanted to mention is actually, like, the entire chapter of Hebrews 12. So if you have a minute, even pause this video and go read it, because it's really, really good. But I'm just going to read a couple little verses. It says, "My child, don't make light of the Lord's discipline, and don't give up when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes each one he accepts as his child. As you endure this divine discipline, remember that God is treating you as his own children. Who ever heard of a child who is never disciplined by his father? If God doesn't discipline you, he does as he does all of his children. It means that you are illegitimate and not really his children at all. Since we respected our earthly fathers who disciplined us, shouldn't we submit even more to the discipline of the Father of our spirits and live forever?" And he also, like, goes on to kind of share that no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. No. It's painful. But afterwards, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. And I just think it kind of ties the whole thing together about, like, why boundaries are so important. And it's not to keep you from anything. It is to protect you and set you up for success in your marriage. And so the better boundaries you have when you're dating, the more fruitful your marriage is going to be, because you're not going to be walking into marriage with, like, the baggage of everything that, like, you wish you would have done while you were dating. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And also, this is something that we've said before, but relationships aren't all about making you happy. They're about making you holy. And the way you are loving someone, and, like, it should reflect the love of Christ. And so, like, yes, you're always meeting your significant other with grace, but you're always pointing them to Jesus, right? So any of these hard conversations, it's always pointing to Jesus, pointing to the cross. Like, that's always the, like, number one thing for me, is like, okay, I'm having this boundary because this is biblical and this is to protect me, and I know that X, Y, or Z triggers me to feel something that, like, I know Christ doesn't want me to feel.
Thanks for watching part 1 of our boundaries video. We're going to do our best to continue putting out great wisdom for you all. And so we're researching these things the best we can. But thanks for just having a conversation with us.
We love you guys. We hope it was encouraging, that you walk away like not feeling like, oh my gosh, I've been doing everything wrong, because we've been there. We've done a lot of things wrong. But we hope that you're just encouraged to be like, oh no matter what my past has looked like, no matter what I did yesterday, there's new mercies every single morning, and I can decide to walk in a new way right here, right now.
We love you.
We love you guys. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.